Hi, I'm going to read you something. This is actually from 2015, which is only about 3 years ago, but it's still pretty relevant today. It is hard to find anything close to 2018 because it's 2015. But anyway, on this subject, it's difficult to find anything written that's close to the 2018 time period. As it is as if the city of Oz, Seattle, has forgotten about the little people, the low income and disabled that are in Seattle. I know most people think they don't deserve a life because a lot of times when you're on SSI, it's free money, but they don't understand that the legitimate people that are on disability suffer during the day. They're unable to work a job. They're unable to hold down things. Now, there's some people that are disabled and they can get a job like a store greeter at like a Old Navy or something at like a shopping mall where they can greet people and they get paid so much an hour. They work part-time and that's fun for them. But for the most part, physically handicapped and disabled people that are mentally handicapped, physically handicapped, or of that nature can't work, so they make money through SSI or Social Security Disability, but on SSI you're only making $755 a month. Now, Seattle has been quietly building affordable housing in neighborhoods. I haven't seen it, but they say it's being done. When it comes to creating affordable housing, Seattle voters can thank themselves, according to this. Most rent-controlled units built in the last 30 years have relied on a property tax. Seattle's affordable housing levy, first approved by Seattleites in the early 80s, that's when federal money for affordable housing was cut dramatically under President Ronald Reagan. Oh, and Ronald Reagan also passed laws that said people that were in mental institutions that could not afford to pay because they didn't have insurance didn't have to stay there. They could be tossed out onto the street. So the homeless rate in various cities went up 50%. That's just a guesstimate, so don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it's around 50% or better. The city has also tried to sway for-profit developers to build cheaper units. Now, unless you've got a good heart and you just like helping the low income and you like doing nice things, if you're in it for the money, if you're a carpetbagger and you came to Seattle just for the money, you're not going to build non-profit apartments like low income, Section 8, 30% of your income in apartments like that. In one program, developers received a tax break, but to those rentals, it says, but those rentals only stay affordable for 12 years. After the 12-year period, they can jack up the prices. A lot of developers, they say, I get these tax breaks by building an apartment for the low income, and if I just wait 12 years, and if you think about it, 12 years is not really a long time. 12 years is not really a long time. If you think about it, after the 12 years is up, they can jack the rent from, say, $389 or $289 or whatever the 30% or the 50% of the area median income is. See, that's how they kick out a lot of the low income as well. Because if you've got apartments that are in an area that, say, people are renting apartments for like $2,000 a month, and they're making roughly, say, $50 to $100 an hour, making $60,000 to $70,000 a year, and you've got a low-income apartment in that area, and you're paying 50% of the medium area income, if say an apartment, if most of the apartments in that area are $2,000, your rent's going to be $1,000 at 50%. Come on now. Okay, it says here, another program lets them build bigger if they add those units. Now, if you add units into your apartment where you've got regular rent, fair, you got fair market, or you got market value apartments plus low income apartments, they'll let you build bigger apartment units, bigger buildings. But a lot of people want to build bigger units. They want to build bigger apartment buildings, but they want to fit as many apartments as they can in there. Like you got a set of luggage. Instead of buying a bigger suitcase, you want to buy the smaller suitcase because it's cheaper, and you want to stuff as much clothes in it and rip the zipper out as you're trying to close the suitcase. Sound familiar? If they added those, but most have refused the offer, opting to pay a penalty instead. A lot of people are saying, we're not going to do it. We'll just pay the penalty. Apparently the penalty is cheaper. These city programs have many names, and they've produced 15,000 units. They are the building blocks of Seattle. They are the building blocks Seattle will use when embarking on a much loftier goal, generating 20,000 more affordable rental units in the next decade. City officials also want to pump up the success programs like the levy and rethink the no-shows. Affordable housing levy. We see the dramatic influence of the Seattle housing levy across the city, readable from the sea of green dots on the map. Each dot represents an apartment building that receives money from the property tax. Sort of like when the governments gave libraries money for the internet and computers. It was called e-grant funding. Yeah. Now, e-grant funding meant that they could not censor what you looked at. Now, if you were a kid, they could put blocking software on the computer. But if you were an adult, the librarians were supposed to go and take the block off your computer, and they were supposed to say, if they asked you why you wanted the block off, all you were supposed to say was, it is for a lawful purpose. I'm searching for a lawful purpose. But the librarians had gotten comfortable with being able to say, we need to look at the website first before we can take the block off. Now, the government said, when you get your e-grant funding, that if you ask for the block to be taken off, it was supposed to be as easy as asking a librarian to go into the back, get a book out of the closed stacks, and bring it to you. Librarians across the United States got comfortable with being able to not do that. And if you did not abide by the rules and regulations of the e-grant funding that your library got from the federal government for internet and computers, you had to pay back all of the e-grant funding, but hardly anybody ever held them to task. The housing levy. We see the dramatic influence of the Seattle housing levy across the city. Readable from the sea of green dots on the map, each dot represents an apartment building that received money. And that's why I mentioned the e-grant funding for the libraries. From the property tax. Non-profit developers like the Low Income Housing Institute are able to build these units with low interest loans that last half a century. This program has created over 12,000 units, or 80% of affordable housing since the early 1980s. You don't have a whole lot of affordable housing units because you got a lot of people just blindly moving to Seattle thinking they're in the land of Oz and they're going to be able to see the wizard and all's going to be well in Munchkin land. It ain't working like that, Seattle. This program targets some of the lowest income people. When they say some of the lowest, I don't really know if this is talking about people on SSI and Social Security Disability or welfare. I'm not for sure if that's what it talks about, but it says here, a 2-bedroom apartment costs $606 for a family of 4, pulling in $26,900 or less. No, it's not talking about the low income. It's talking about the lower income. And when I say lower income, low income would be people on disability making $1,000 or less a month. The lower income is people that are working a job and they're making $26,900 a month or less. Let me do some math here. That's $26,900 or less a year. Okay, let me get to this. $26,900 divided by 12 equals 2,200 divided by 40 hours a week. You're making, when they say 26,900, you're making roughly $56 an hour. That's not low income. That is lower income. There's a distinction there. Low income is people making under $1,000. Lower income is people making under $26,900 or less a year. What could change? A committee studying affordable housing in Seattle, known by wonks, whatever a wonk is, as the HALA committee, wants to double the levy when it comes up for a vote again in the fall. Now remember, this was back in the 2015 time frame. Now, in 2016, developer fees paid into this fund could also increase, as the committee also wants commercial developers to help pay for affordable housing. Now, I get it. You need more housing. Where in the hell are you going to build it? You're going to build it in somebody's front yard? You're going to build it in a treehouse? You're going to put it in a backyard? You're going to build it in the middle of the street? And it's going to have an opening so traffic can come in and out? Like, you know, those big old trees where they cut the little area through it so the traffic can go through but the tree still stands? 12 years of cheaper housing. A second program appears to be the runner-up when it comes to productivity. A not insignificant number of blue dots indicated apartment buildings where developers are given a tax in exchange for including affordable units. After a spotty start in the late 1990s, this program, known as the Multifamily Tax Exemption Program, has consistently turned out affordable apartments since the end of the recession. These buildings included more than 2,400 affordable units. The people with this program, the problem with this program is that the rent on these units stay low for only 12 years before snapping up to market rates. And once they go up to market rates, if you live there for 12 years and it goes up to market rate, now the unit owners, the unit landlords, the mafia don landlords are not going to allow the rent to stay. They only have to keep it for 12 years at a low income. Then they can make all the profit they want. Gold Plus Platinum, if you're into Star Trek, if you're a Ferengi, you want that Gold Plus Platinum. Yes, you do. And a lot of the landlords are like Ferengi. They're in it for the profit. They're not in it to help anybody else unless it makes them profit. And the reason I talk about Star Trek is because Seattle has the Space Needle, and it is known as the city of the future. Okay, what could change? The committee wants Seattle to lobby the Washington legislatures to allow developers to extend their tax breaks and rent control to 24 years. The city council must reauthorize the program this year if it is to continue. Now, I've talked about this in the past. The state did a really stupid thing when they decided to pass laws that say the cities can't defend themselves against mafia don landlords and the Ferengi. They have decided to pass laws that say that you cannot force somebody to charge less rent on an apartment building. If the citizen can't afford it, it's just a big old fuck you to the citizens of Seattle. And I know that'll get me in a little bit of trouble, but I wanted to drive home a point that the carpetbaggers and the Ferengi and the mafia don landlords that moved into Seattle and destroyed everything that was good about Seattle, everything that was beautiful about Seattle, and everything that was pleasant about Seattle, and turned it into a hustling, bustling superfly. Y'all just ruined it. You took the one place in the world that was gorgeous and you filled it up with loads and loads of problems. Failed incentives. Seattle hoped for profit developers. Seattle hoped for... Oh, let me read this. It's the way you read it that makes all the sense in the world. Seattle hoped for... I'm still reading it wrong. Seattle hoped for-profit... There we go. Seattle hoped for-profit developers would help the effort. They asked builders to include affordable housing that would stay rent controlled for 50 years, and if they weren't game, they would have to pay a penalty. It backfired. It would be cheaper just to pay the penalty. The program failed. Developers roundly chose to pay the fee to avoid this obligation. Now, if I was the mayor of Seattle and part of the city council, I would have done it like this. Okay, you pay that penalty? Okay, fine. You have to pay that every month. Every month you have to pay that. Just like they're extorting the city and the citizens of Seattle, the city council and the mayor should fight back and extort the landlords. Beat them at their own game. Penalize them so much that they won't have no choice but to do affordable housing. Yeah. In 2021, if none of this gets taken care of by then, I'm running for mayor of Seattle. I am. I threw my ring in the hat. I threw my hat in the ring. And I've got ideas that'll fix this. I'm sick and tired of just talking about it. I'm talking about a class action lawsuit for the state of Washington because they will not pass laws that do away with the law that they passed in 1981 that says that cities and towns cannot do rent restrictions. Now, a spokesperson for the Office of Housing says that that's not a failure, as those fees help nonprofits. Oh, yeah, okay. Those fees help nonprofit developers build housing, just like the levy, but the program has not engaged for-profit developers in the way the city officials had anticipated. The city intends to rethink the program. I'll tell you how to rethink the program. I'll tell you how to rethink the program. You pass a levy on the for-profit builders, and you make them pay it every month. Just like the mafia goes around every month collecting what they owe, what people owe. You make the city, you make the landlords that want to make all this money off the citizens in the city of Seattle. You guys want to get rich off of our city? Fuck you. You can pay a penalty. How do you like them apples? What would change if this happened? The Affordable Housing Committee recommends making this a mandatory program in urban villages where the city has chosen to channel most of its growth. Developers would be allowed to build bigger buildings but would be required to include rent-restricted units whether or not they take advantage of the incentive. The new program would be called Mandatory Inclusionary Housing. Okay. How's that going to work? The state passed that law. Until you get that law taken away, the city basically can't do anything. Now, you can say, okay, we can't cap your rent. We're asking you to build affordable housing in this price range. We're asking you to build this in this price range. And if you decide not to build it in this price range, we will tax the shit out of you 50% annually, and you'll have to pay a gratitude every month to the city, just like the mafia. The bottom line is, it's important not to overstate the role of these programs in creating this housing. You can't say that things are going to get done if you don't really know for sure that they're going to get done. You got to know the area you're from. You got to know what area you're at. You got to know exactly how to deal with the people you're dealing with. It says here, these local programs form just a fraction of the funding required for the apartment building you see on this map. Okay, now there's a map, and I didn't print out the map because I can't show it to you anyway. But there's a map and there's buildings on it. But the role filled by these local programs is often considered vital, making up just enough of the funding to make these projects pencil out, which means, of course, there are other ways to create affordable housing than looking to formal programs like these. Developers say they could create more affordable housing if minimum requirements on the unit size were relaxed. Yeah, they want to put 12 units, 100 square foot, 12 units, and with a shared kitchen and a shared bath in a building. They want to do 12. Say you got 12 units in a building, they're 100 square foot, about the size of a bedroom, like a room for rent. You get a shared kitchen, shared bath, and you got 12 units, and say you got, with a shared kitchen and shared bath, that counts as one apartment. Now say you got a building, you got 12, 24, 48, 86. I guess that's 86. Is it 86? 12 times 4. Let me do the math here. That's why if I ever become the mayor of Seattle, I'll carry a calculator or I'll have somebody in my hip pocket that understands what I'm doing. You have 12 times 4. That's 48. You have 48 units in a building with 4 kitchens and 4 shared bathrooms, which means you have what? You have 4 apartments that are 12 bedrooms each. A lot of people are saying, we're downsizing, our footprint is too big, we want to minimalize. We're tired of living in big spacious apartments that look lush and lavish. We're tired of having large plush couches and easy chairs and big 100-inch TV screens. We want 100 square feet where we can just basically fit a bicycle in there with a small bed, a futon that we can sleep in, because hey, we work at Microsoft. We're hardly ever at home. We just need a place to shower up really quick, and we need a place to rest our head, and we go out drinking at night after we get done with work. Yahoo! We're going out drinking, and we're going out partying and having a nightlife. And we're gonna downsize so we don't have very much space to deal with. I need space. Of course, there are other ways to create affordable developers, okay, but okay, so such micro apartments would be rented out at market rate. $1,000 for a micro apartment. But even without formal restrictions on rent, they would be more affordable due to their small size. Yeah, right. It's a solution that favors young single workers willing to live in such tight quarters. Young single workers, people at Facebook, people at Amazon, and people at Microsoft. They're single, they're young, they're attractive, they go out on the nightlife, and they go partying, and they go dancing, and they go out to restaurants, and they go to coffee shops, and they go do trendy stuff. And they're willing to live in tight quarters because they don't need much, they don't expect much because they're young. Oh, this is quarters over large families that require more bedrooms. I'm a single guy. I'm 51 years old. I need big space. My studio apartment is 384 square feet. I pay $435 a month for that. It's considered affordable housing, but the rent that I'm paying, although it's not very much, the size of the apartment is too freaking small. I weigh a little over 300 pounds and I love to cook. And I don't like when I cook food for everything to end up on my clothes, in my closet. When you cook fish, you don't want to walk outside in a dress shirt smelling like you just went to a fish market. But the minimum size rule is just one of the many constraints developers say restrict the natural flow of affordable housing into the market. Other standards often imposed for reasons of neighborhood aesthetics or life safety concerns can have an indirect impact on the cost of housing. Also, there are other players in the field creating affordable housing, such as the federal government, which currently controls over 28,000 apartments in the city. Over the decades, the capacity of federal government to build new affordable housing has declined, while Seattle's own local programs have been ramping up. Now, I get it, Seattle. If you're going to build an apartment building and you have, like, say, 100 units in there, wouldn't it be cheaper for you to build, say, 100 foot units, 100 square foot units? You have 12 pods to one shared kitchen and one shared bath. You have one, and then inside the apartments they have like maybe a tabletop refrigerator and a microwave. That 12 pods with the shared kitchen and bath counts as one unit. One apartment built, one apartment. So it's cheaper in the long run, because I go to this place to buy steak, and I like porterhouse, as well as ribeye and tomahawk steaks and various other things, but porterhouse. The guy brings out the porterhouse steak that hasn't been cut yet. On one side is the T-bones, on the other side is the porterhouses. Now I like my porterhouse steak to be nice and even and thick, at least 2 inches thick. They don't like to cut it like that because they got one roast, one bone in, and they want to get as many out of that as they can. They want to cut, instead of 2 inch, well, 2 inch thick is probably, 2 inch thick is probably about, say, like that thick, about that thick. They want to cut them about that thick, because for every 2 inches, I'm taking profit off of them. Of course, they are still charging by the pound, but you can say you can charge more. You can get more steaks out of that. In the long run, they think they're making more money. So anyway, I'm going to leave you on that. That has been living in a Seattle area, or the city of Oz, and forgetting about the little people or the low income. This has been All Things Considered, because I consider all things.